Howdy. Welcome to another week of Canon Calls. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that for a very limited time only, Douglas Wilson's Man Rampant is available worldwide. If you go to canonpress.com/manrampant, you will find that there is a quarantine special on Man Rampant that is available worldwide. Additionally, at canonpress.com from March 30th through April 3rd, we are having the spring sale. Everything's 20% off. For every order that reaches $50, you will get a free copy of N.D. Wilson's satire of the Left Behind series called Right Behind for free. Additionally, for every order that you spend $100, you will get free shipping. So, run, don't walk. The Canon Press sale at canonpress.com, and additionally, if you live outside of the country and you can't access Man Rampant on Amazon Prime, you can get it now at canonpress.com/manrampant. Okay, welcome to another episode of Canon Calls. Special guest, Brian Phillips, returns to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming back, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, listen, man, since we've talked, you released the Dante Canon Classic. Or we all released. I guess we in partnership released it.
Exactly.
So I'm always wanting to give Canon Classics as much shine as possible. I think it's probably one of our more underrated things that we have going on at Canon Press. So what I wanted to do is have you on to talk about Dante. And then if we could, we kind of hinted at it last time you were here. You've been doing some EMS stuff. You're saving lives and doing various other things. So I'd love to talk to you about some of that.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, sweet. So, okay, who is Dante? And then should I also care?
I mean, Dante was one of the greatest poets in the history of the world, and I think you should care about that,
Sure.
particularly as Christians. I think we should be interested in what Dante did in the Divine Comedy, because even though there are I mean, it takes a while to get used to reading Dante, and it can take a while to sort of dig into it. There's a lot of people find some obstacles there, and what he wrote, is very contextualized. I mean, there's a lot of his political enemies, his lifelong friends, and people that lived through the same political circumstances he did that are mentioned in his work. But we shouldn't let that deter us from paying attention to what he has to say. So the guide that I wrote was just on the Inferno. Of course, the Divine Comedy is in three parts: the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and Paradiso. So it's this journey through hell, purgatory, and then into heaven. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot there worth looking into.
So one thing I remember in college when I went through it, I remember having the feeling of it was like one big throwback to all the Greeks. Like we had just worked our way all through that. And then it was like one big happy reunion.
Yeah.
There's harpies, there's all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. and you encounter a lot of the heroes and the villains from the Greeks and the Romans. Dante, as an Italian, I mean, he was from Florence. He seems to, favor the Romans far more than the Greeks.
Right.
For example, he puts Odysseus or Ulysses in hell, and he puts him in the circle of the traitors. The deceivers.
Right.
I should say. Because he came up with the plot for the Trojan horse, as we call it. And so, that leads to interesting discussions about the of deception and warfare and so on. But there is kind of a reunion of those characters. And in fact, Dante in the first circle of hell meets some of the greatest minds of the Greco-Roman world, and the great poets. Homer, Virgil is his guide, of course, so he's already with for Ovid, Horace, Lucan, and then Ver, Dante says that they invited him to join their band. So it sort of seems like Dante's humility needed some work, right? He's like, I'm joined with the greatest poets in the history of the world, and they said, "Hey, you belong with us.
Right.
Join our band." But then, of course, in all fairness, I think most of us would put him in the top three anyway. So, come to find out, he wasn't wrong.
Right.
But still, it's better when someone else says it, right?
Right. What a Babe Ruth moment, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so when you set out to write the guide, so for those that don't know, Canon is doing essentially we started with the top 100 classics, and our in-house illustrator Forrest Dickinson gave everything a brand new, beautiful cover. We're reprinting the classic itself, and then we're adding in folks, teachers, classical teachers to basically give a guide. So when you sat down to do the Inferno guide, what did you have in mind in terms of like what is this about? What is Dante up to?
Right. Yeah, I think what stands out to me as important is that Dante is describing the journey of the soul.
Hmm.
Um, and even though we may not agree with everything and how he depicts it, it's clearly intended as an extension of those same journeys through Hades, those journeys through the afterlife, but from a Christian perspective. And Dante was Catholic, and so again, depending on the reader, if you're a Protestant going into Dante's work, then obviously you're going to run into some things that you're like, I don't know about that. But that shouldn't deter us from what he's really describing. I mean, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Aeneid, there are these, well, in the Odyssey, the Aeneid in particular, there are these journeys through Hades, um, that are very revealing. And so when Dante steps in to do that same thing, it's really important that we notice the contrast there,
Hmm.
right? Dante's not describing his own heroic journey, to win glory for himself, even though his pride does play in, and I'm top six poet, and all that. But in the bigger picture, he's describing the journey of the soul. He starts through hell, and it's really serving as a warning. Look, this is where your sin takes you, right? And then as he ascends back out into purgatory and he's going up the mountain of purgatory, he has a mark on his head for each of the seven deadly sins. And as he ascends, he's going through this travail, this difficult journey, and the sins are taken away, marked off, so to speak. And he notices that his soul becomes lighter as his sin is removed.
Hmm.
So there's a lot there to consider, and his longing for heaven and realizing that it's his sin, it's his lack of repentance that's keeping him from where he wants to go, from where his soul longs to go. And so I think that there's a lot there that as Christians we need to really pay attention to, and that we can learn from, even if we might word it differently, and view it differently. We can still learn a great deal from it. So I think in writing the guide, my big concern was trying to help readers see the value of this work, and how it really can teach us a lot of things that we tend to overlook, because he depicts sin in such a real, physical, deadly kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the real issue with Dante, is that in reading the Inferno, in particular the Inferno, because that's the the one of the three
Right.
parts of the comedy that I wrote about. Um, the Inferno forces you to come to terms with how ugly sin actually is, um, and he does depict some pretty gruesome punishment there. but he's very honest about what sin does to you. And so he's essentially taking what sin does to the soul and putting it into a very physical picture.
Love it.
And I think that that depiction is so unforgettable that it's hard to read Dante seriously and to walk away and not see your own sin in a very different light, a more serious light. And I think that that's certainly worth the time. Even if you got nothing else out of it, that's worth the time.
Definitely an edifying task, and probably something. Definitely sounds like everybody could use maybe a dose of that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I guess we don't have you slotted for the other two.
No, not at this point.
Okay.
Not
Okay. Well, sweet, man. Well, listen, we almost teased it last time. Currently, you're a pastor,
yet.
and you do some teaching over at Cersei.
Yep.
And then what are you doing now? You're like you're saving lives.
Yeah. I also work as an EMT for our county EMS. Yeah, 911 agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it should be noted that it was last year, I think it was last year in Atlanta. We were there at
Yeah.
ACCS,
Yeah.
and I was at my booth at the Canon booth spinning the plates, and then suddenly Brian sprints past me with a bag and everything, and I thought, I wonder if he would move that fast if something were to happen to me. Uh, right? Didn't that happen?
Well, yeah, I was at the you're at the booth for Canon Press, and I was at the booth for um, Cersei,
Yeah.
and um, it was I think it was actually Daniel Fukushon from Roman
Oh,
Roads
that's right. Yeah.
came up to me and said, "Brian, there's a lady who passed out over here near our booth. Can you come help her?" And we had driven to that conference, so I had my medical bag with me. And actually, I kind of threw it into our van because I didn't want to leave it in my car because um, one, it was what, July, so I
Right.
knew the medications in there probably that wouldn't be best for them, so I just carried it along as an afterthought. And that was the last day of the conference, so my medical bag was actually downstairs at the booth because we were checking out that day.
Oh, right,
So,
right.
yeah, so my coworker Brandon brought the bag over. Yeah, and
To
I would move at an appropriate speed to get to the gig.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, so how's it been? You were on shift yesterday, correct?
Mhm.
So we're obviously in interesting times. I mentioned last week we had a really great episode with Dr. Story, who's in town here in Moscow, sort of giving some basic rudimentary advice. Um, what's life like out there? You're in North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's life like over there?
It you know, it's tricky right now. It is. If I told you that I wasn't nervous, working EMS
Yeah,
at a time like this, I'd be lying.
sure.
It is something that we have to take seriously. At the same time, I think it's been particularly difficult because um, there's so much conflicting information out there, and it's hard to know what's the true picture of what's really going on. Um, and so I think it is important for people to be careful. Don't take unnecessary risks and all of that. But from a perspective of EMS, it is kind of at a point. At least I'll just speak for myself that when the radio goes off and you know that your truck is being dispatched, you do kind of hold your breath. Every time the radio goes off and I'm dispatched to something that's not a coronavirus type call,
Right.
there is a bit of relief,
Sure.
and there's part of me, particularly as a Christian, as a pastor, I feel bad when I hear oh, it's an overdose. And I'm like, whew, thank
Sure.
the Lord.
Sure.
Yeah. But it is the way it is. It's just kind of what we're going through right now. This is a good opportunity for Christians to really learn how to live what we say we believe. You know, we we claim to believe in the sovereignty of God. We pray that God will help us to trust Him, to be faithful, to be consistent, in even in the face of very difficult circumstances. And this is a good opportunity to live it out. It's not fun, but it is a good opportunity to live it out. And so my prayer is that as a Christian in EMS, which can be a rough world at times, that the Lord will give me the grace to be faithful and to be consistent, so that God will use this tragedy to bring a lot of people to Himself.
And you mentioned right there that the EMS world can be a darker world, whether there's a virus pandemic going on or not.
Right.
My dad has done EMS firefighter stuff for most of my whole life, so definitely familiar with that side of it.
Yeah.
What would make a pastor teaching the classics in his spare time want to do something like that?
Hmm. Well, I mean, for me, it's something I always wanted to work in emergency medicine. The Reader's Digest version. Um, I won't start exactly at my birth,
Sure.
but
If you need to, take your time.
but no, I mean, from the as long as I can remember, I wanted to work in emergency medicine. I just always did. And the plan was, I was going to go into the military as a combat medic, and come out and then let them help pay for medical school. And I always jokingly say God ruined my plans, and I ended up being called into pastoral ministry. So but a couple of years ago, I was contacted by an army recruiter about coming in as a chaplain, and it sort of just brought back those old goals, those things that I wanted to do. As my wife and I and the elders and I prayed about it, we all kind of had this sense that um, that's maybe not the path for it, but that's what led me to EMT school. And so as a way for me to kind of come back around, I did it backwards. Usually it's when somebody hits their 40s or so that they go back to seminary. So I went into pastoral ministry first, and then went into uh, to the emergency stuff later. But I think it's a good fit for a pastor. The whole idea of a minister or a pastor being just a full-time pastor and nothing else is a historically is a pretty novel concept. It's a new idea. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if pastors can find opportunities to be involved in places where their community really needs help
Yeah.
in some of the most difficult situations, I think that's definitely something to consider. And I think I've been able to be at least an ear for some people who normally would not have dreamed of seeking advice from a pastor. Um, and just being available for that has been well worth it. Not to mention, the people that have serious medical issues, or traumatic injuries or whatever, that I'm able to help in the community too. So I mean, obviously that's all wonderful, but I ended up in it because something that I always wanted to do, and and that desire really never left me. And then the Lord opened a door for me to be able to do that while continuing pastoral ministry.
So as far as, being banished home with the rest of us, you guys already homeschooled, right?
Yeah, we did. We've homeschooled from the beginning. Our
Okay.
oldest she's about to turn 13, and so it's kind of funny. I've seen this idea sort of circulating on social media, but when your normal state of life is described as quarantine, you know, we didn't really, we're certainly not antisocial by any means. But as far as the day in day out, Monday through Friday, it was kind of like, well, I mean, the kids are like, I don't know what the big deal is, Dad. I mean, we're I kind of like being home.
Right, right.
Um, the biggest struggle for me, and I think most Christians would certainly agree with this, is that um, I always knew that our congregation was a tight knit bunch,
Okay,
uh, really, really close. And so that's the part that's really stinging right now, is um, trying to figure out ways to stay in touch. And, we've been doing services via Zoom,
okay,
because we have quite a few people in our congregation that work in healthcare.
okay.
So, and in different systems, like different counties, different hospitals, different services. So, um, that was a particular risk factor, I guess, that we had to keep in mind. So we've been um, meeting for worship online, and in our church, we're a CREC congregation, so we really value that coming together
Yep.
and being together physically, seeing each other, communing together, even having coffee and stuff after church. That was all really important. And so I think that this whole situation has highlighted to us just how valuable that really is. That's been the toughest part for us.
As a veteran yourself, what are some tips for folks like this is a brand new thing to them?
Yeah. Well, particularly if you have kids and homeschooling is new to you, then I think my first piece of advice would be to try to get a routine, set a schedule. Because what can happen is that you just end up sort of flailing around, and you have to have routine. We all thrive on routine. It's nice to kind of get away from routine for a bit, but given that this is going to be a sort of a longer term thing, um as in like more than a weekend or a vacation or something, you really do have to set a schedule, for the things that you need to accomplish. um and then try to include within that schedule some variety. One of the things too is, and this is both speaking as a dad of homeschoolers and also from EMS perspective, I guess everyone's talking about staying home, but that doesn't mean staying inside. You really do need to get out in the sun. You need to be outside. um, it's good for your immune system. It's good for how you're dealing with stress. And this is a stressful time for everyone. So yeah, definitely get outside. There's also tons and tons of stuff available now online for free.
Oh, right.
Um, I know. I think Roman Roads is doing some free classes, or at least some really discounted
Yeah.
classes
Yeah.
for kids who are suddenly homeschooling, and for even kids who are already homeschooling. But then, the Cersei Institute, we're doing some morning time webinars every morning
Oh, wow.
for free. You can sign up for those, and it's basically a time of prayer, scripture reading, and then whoever's leading that webinar will read a story. Um, and so it's like 30 minutes or so. So there are things that you can get your kids involved in online. It's one of those times that technology is proving to be a real blessing. As much as we often complain about it,
Right.
it's a real can be a real blessing right now.
Right. So I know you guys are probably doing a ton of free content like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're teaching? Anything we can point folks to go see what you're doing?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm leading the morning time webinar tomorrow,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
So,
This is
so if
going
you
up
want to,
today, so this will get to people in time.
oh, cool. Yeah, so I mean, if you go to Cersei Institute's Facebook page, you can find it there. You can also find a lot of the free stuff we're doing on cerseiinstitute.com. There is a free webinar coming up about teaching online. There's one on, oh goodness, I forget the date, but it's coming up on just advice for homeschooling. What to do, what not to do.
Okay.
And then I've got one coming up at the end of April on the Greek world. So it's kind of
There
a
we go.
history webinar that I'm doing. So yeah, we've
Nice.
got a lot of stuff going on. There's a bunch of literature webinars too for those who are interested. My friend Renee Mathis is doing a literature webinar on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it'd be good stuff. It could end up being more like a documentary
I
of
was
your
gonna say,
quarantine.
yeah. Now, when did you say your Greek World one was?
That is on April 30th.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happens with or without any, virus pandemic, given that it's
Right.
online.
Right.
So, everybody go check that out, and then that may be like the perfect prerequisite to then going to your Inferno guide.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Check out the Inferno Guide too from Canon, and I really enjoyed writing it. So, anyone who reads it, hope you enjoy it too. And I know our conversation's kind of gone all over the place in this podcast, like it usually does when you and I get together in person. But pray for the folks who are on the front lines of this thing. It's certainly worse in some places than others. It's kind of uncertain times. It's not a time to panic, just a time to use good judgment, and but pray for the people who are the ER doctors, ER nurses, EMS. um, these are people that they have spouses and families and all that, and they're still in the midst of this uncertainty, kind of right on the front lines of it. So remember to
No,
lift each other up.
absolutely. Absolutely. Stay calm, wash your hands, and
Yeah,
go
which is,
go.
I mean, that's good advice all the time.
It really is. I mean, have you thought about I've just been considering how much corona I've washed off my hands alone,
Yeah, yeah.
buckets of it, I'm sure.
Uh,
So yeah, stay calm, wash your hands, and then go find some great classical content online from Brian, from us. Thank you, dude.
yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me.